welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine, which is sponsored by Enterprise Fleet Management. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the fleet industry for the week of March 15th, 2021. And to start this week's presentation, I'd like to first examine fuel pricing trends, in particular gasoline and diesel prices, both of which are continuing to trend upward. And just last week, the American Automobile Association, AAA, was the latest organization to forecast that gasoline prices will reach $4 a gallon in some states by this summer. Well, it's already occurred in California. The real question is, how widespread will $3 per gallon or $4 per gallon gasoline prices be in other states? Vehicle resale values continue to remain strong, and in the coming months, used vehicle demand and resale values will be further stimulated by income tax returns and by the current $1,400 stimulus checks, which in the past have been proven to be used as down payments in purchasing used vehicles. So my forecast for fleet managers is to anticipate positive returns for the resale of out-of-service fleet vehicles in the coming month. Order to delivery is another story. Order to delivery times for new vehicles continue to lengthen, and out of stock fleet purchases from dealer inventory is extremely difficult due to tight inventories and the ongoing strong retail demand. And if you're lucky to find a unit in dealer stock that a dealer is actually willing to sell to you, be prepared to pay a premium that'll most likely cost you a pretty penny. Next, I'd like to examine current pricing trends on replacement tires. And historically, tire OEMs have increased their prices in either April or September, and this year they haven't disappointed us. And here are some examples. Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company announced that it'll increase prices for its Goodyear, Dunlop, and Kelly brand consumer tires up to 8% on April 1. Bridgestone Americas, Inc., they're going to raise prices for its entire Bridgestone brand commercial truck tire and Bandag retreading portfolios in the US and Canada up to 8% effective April 1. And another example is Michelin, which also announced an 8% increase on select Michelin, BF Goodrich, and Uniroyal passenger and light truck tires, also effective April 1, 2021. And the only thing I can say is, thank God for national account pricing. So shifting gears, I'd like to point out that last Thursday, March 11th, was the 1-year anniversary that COVID-19 was officially declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And without a doubt, this pandemic will go down as the most disruptive event in the history of the fleet industry to date. And there are many unprecedented events. There's so many of them that have been brought on by this pandemic, but in particular, the temporary stoppage of new vehicle assembly in North America. Now, it's true, new vehicle production did stop during the Second World War, but the important point is that the factories remained open and they simply shifted their production from building retail cars to different types of products such as tanks, Jeeps, and even bombers. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, all production ceased at North American auto plants, and this was unprecedented. But let's use this anniversary to kind of look forward rather than looking backwards. So when you're making a prediction and looking to the future of fleet, I liken it to a billiard game. So stay with me. When a cue ball hits a rack set of balls, it triggers not only that initial reaction, but also numerous unanticipated secondary and even tertiary reactions with balls deflecting off of other careening balls that ultimately changes all of their trajectories. And today, we're experiencing some of these secondary effects of the pandemic, one of which is the current microchip shortage, which is definitely an unanticipated secondary effect. When the auto factories reopened, the semiconductor manufacturers just didn't have the capacity to reallocate sufficient production back to the auto companies to meet their increased demands, resulting in the current production constraint. And the initial forecast was for the chip shortage to be alleviated by the end of the first half of calendar year 2021. But now we're starting to hear from suppliers that are starting to hedge their forecasts. And just like the pandemic, the goalposts are moving forward. Last week, I heard from forecasters, at least for me, say for the first time that the chip shortage may continue into late calendar year 2021. So not mid-year, but now late calendar year. And as Yogi Berra famously said, it's like deja vu all over again. But back to my billiards analogy that I made earlier, in examining these unanticipated secondary effects, there's another one that's now occurring, which is the potential shortage of polyurethane foam used to construct vehicle seats, which is a byproduct of the oil refining process. And during the recent winter storm, several large oil refineries went offline. And so not only did they quit refining gasoline, but they also quit producing other petroleum byproducts such as polyurethane foam. And now there's a concern that there may be an emerging inventory constraint in getting polyurethane foam to build vehicle seats. So while the concern is there, it's still too early to say what impact this is going to have on overall pricing or order to delivery times, and we'll just have to wait to see. Well, it may seem like this model year has been one supply constraint after another. Supply hiccups do occur every year, and this year is no different. And these supply constraints are temporary and they're going to soon pass. But my point in making these examples is to illustrate that the fleet industry, despite what we'd like to think, is not the captain of its own destiny. Often fleet is like the billiard balls that I described earlier, where we're blindsided by unanticipated events or pricing pressures that we can't control. And a lot of times, in fact, most times, fleet managers were asked to manage events outside of our very control, and the best that we can do is simply mitigate or lessen the impact. Now, I pride myself on being a student of the history of the fleet industry, and I can tell you that the biggest changes that I've experienced have always been as a result of two factors. It's either changes in tax law or changes in governmental regulations. And here's one example that came out last week on the potential impact of proposed changes in tax law. So last Thursday, in a LinkedIn post, GM President Mark Royce called for the US government to introduce investment tax credits to incentivize companies to establish EV manufacturing, and I assume this also includes EV battery manufacturing capacity in the US, and to help build out the US supply chain. And I think it's an intriguing proposal. And in the past, investment tax credits have played an important role in shaping the fleet industry, and they have a potential to do likewise as the industry transitions to electrification. And I believe that this proposal definitely deserves closer consideration by congressional tax committees, or should be included as part of the long anticipated infrastructure bill if one ever does move forward. But with that said, I'd like to conclude my State of the Fleet Industry presentation for the week of March 15th, 2021, and I want to thank you for listening.